he and I had many conversations like that. This student is extremely intelligent. I miss him very much, which is probably why I'm crying. But it was one of those times where, he didn't need anything other than sitting and having connection, true, meaningful connection with someone that he could talk to. And he knew he could do that with me because we had set that foundation a long time before that. He and I had already had that connection, so he felt safe. And so I don't know, it's just it's so beautiful when you work with students because their ability to connect on a deep level, they don't even know they're doing it and they just do it naturally. I feel like with adults it's really easy for us to shut ourselves off, because we mask and we have all of these strategies so people can't know our deepest feelings. We do it all the time, but a lot of these kids don't have those walls put up yet.
Welcome to the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. I am your host, Jamal Jivanjee. I'm a best-selling author, podcaster, full-time life coach, and a communications and cultural analyst. After spending over 20 years of working with people in various stages of struggle and challenge, and after traveling to many places all around the world, visiting many different cultures, I have discovered the common roots of human suffering, along with the sustainable solutions required to help people heal and become whole and liberated. This podcast is my gift to you to serve you on your journey into healing, wholeness, and liberation. I invite you to buckle in and to settle in to each episode here on this podcast. There's something for you in each conversation. Hello. I want to welcome everybody to this episode. This is a treat because I have a very special human being who's I'm looking at her through a screen. We actually live together. She's not here at home where I am in my home right now. And I'm here in my office, but I am talking to my wife, my beautiful bride, Taylor Jivanjee. She is joining us for a very special episode of the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. She's got some really exciting things to talk about. She's getting ready to start a brand new school year, but she really has some nuggets that you may think may not apply to you. But I promise you, if you're listening to this episode, I want you to take notes. I want you to be prepared to pause this podcast and to write some things down, because everything that she's going to talk about is relevant to you, no matter what your age is, what your situation is. It's relevant to your experience, to your life, and it's going to apply to a situation that you're facing today. Okay, so be prepared. But Taylor, I'm so happy you are joining us for season 2. You were a guest on the podcast many years ago, and now you're back, but you're in a very different station in life today. And so I can't wait to talk more about that. But with all that said, Taylor, welcome. Glad that you're here.
Thanks for having me back.
Of course. I'm excited. So Taylor, as people who follow this podcast or know me, you know that Taylor is my wife. I don't want to rehash it, but we met in the nation of Spain in Europe several years ago when we both did the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage, which is a 500-mile walk. It starts in southwest France, the way we did it, and then it ends in Santiago, Spain. It's an epic, life-changing thing. And we did not know each other, but we met there in Spain on this walk. That's a whole story. I met her for just a few minutes. So it wasn't like we even spent a lot of time together, but she lived an hour away from me here in Southern California, even though we never met in California. We met in Spain, but that's how our relationship began. But we won't rehash that because that's a whole other conversation that we already had. It's a long story. Yes. But Taylor obviously holds a very special place in my heart. Taylor is very passionate about helping people. She loves to help people, more specifically, tiny human beings or smaller human beings is like she calls herself. There's a little sign behind her. She is actually at school in her classroom. She's an educator, and on her desk, she has a sign that says "Tiny Human Tamer," and that's what she likes to describe herself. So, the last time we talked on this podcast many years ago, you were in college getting your master's,
Yep.
um, and you were preparing to become a teacher, and now you
Yes.
have since become a master.
I don't know
So,
about that.
well, you have graduated with your master's. You've been employed for the last few years as an educator
Yep.
in the school system here where we live in our town. Tell us a little bit about how it's been. Like, what have you been doing? What is your job?
So, I started working at the school I'm currently at 2.5 years ago. I am a special education teacher, and so I teach students with mild to moderate learning disabilities, and that's kindergarten through fifth grade. So, a big range of students by age, disability, ability, behavior. I absolutely love it. I started on my birthday, and it kind of feels like the greatest birthday present I've ever received. Um, and I joke that you and I do the same thing. We both want to help people. It's just your students listen, and I feel like mine don't have the time. But no, I absolutely love my kids, and I feel like I'm in the perfect right spot for me, and just for my purpose to make a difference and to help these kiddos learn in academics, but just life skills and how to be a good human.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And I remember when your first day on your teaching job at the school there was your birthday, and it's pretty epic because I personally don't see coincidences. You know, I like to look for the deeper meaning in things, and the fact that you started your new career on your birthday, this was a few years back, but the fact that you started your career on your birthday to me was very significant and symbolic of you moving into your birth purpose, right? Your birth purpose of reaching down into these little human beings and connecting with them and helping them and being able to relate with them. We've talked about this. A lot of people who know you will say this. Your spirit is like an elementary, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but you have a spirit that so aptly, I mean, like you're in the perfect age bracket of elementary children working with them because you're kind of a big kid at heart.
I
That's
am.
how I see you.
I have some childlike qualities that you get to enjoy as well as my students.
Yes. It's endearing. I love it. I love it. But I will say this, okay? So you've been doing this for a few years. I'm curious how long it took you to realize, like, sometimes you experience something and there's like a click inside, and that click just you feel like this is what I'm here to do. I feel that way, in my work as a coach. Sometimes when I'm, working with somebody or speaking to people in some capacity, there's that click and you can feel it deeply. And it's that sense of like, this is what I'm here to do. How long did it take for you to feel that? Or have you felt it?
I think I felt it in stages, like in waves.
Okay.
So before I was a teacher, I was an instructional aide at the
Mm-hmm.
middle school. So I was working with students with learning disabilities, and I was working with students who were part of our behavior program at the middle school. And so these are students who typically have a lot of trauma. You see a lot of behaviors, a lot of aggressive behaviors. And so that's, a job that not a lot of people necessarily want to do because as an instructional aide, if I'm just going to be honest, you're not getting paid a lot. You don't get paid over summer. You only work 6 hours a day. And it's a pretty tough demographic of students to work with in a behavior class at the middle school. And I was happier than I'd ever been. I would come home from work, I'd be tired, physically tired, but I
Mm-hmm.
just absolutely loved what I did. It was the first time in my life I did not dread going to work.
Mm,
There were days I wish certain kids would be absent so I could have a break, but I did not dread going to work. And
mm,
so that was kind of the first taste of it. And then when I started working here, I work at a school called Valley of Enchantment Elementary School. And as I drove to work on my first day, Valley of Enchantment really like nails it on the head. Like it is, you drive into this little valley and there's this perfect, adorable little elementary school just sitting there, and we live in the mountains, so you're as you're in the valley, it's just surrounded by trees. And a daughter, I think, of one of the previous teachers has like painted a lot of different parts of the school. Like my door has a butterfly on it, and it's just beautiful. And so I was driving to school for the first time, and I had this thought like, I cannot believe that this is my life. This is my job. Like, this is where I'm going to work. And then that feeling just continued. I got to meet my students and the people I work with. And it continued to, I didn't think it could get better. And then that feeling of just being in the right place at the right time and just loving every moment of every day, it just continued to grow. And my job is stressful. I deal with a lot of parents. I deal with a lot of high behavior students. I deal with attorneys. It's a lot. I hold almost 100 meetings a year, and it's stuff that most people like. That part of the job people don't like. But I love it all. Like there's not something that's come my way that I haven't been like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
mm. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I love personally, just as your husband, one of the things I appreciate witnessing is the care that you put into your job. I mean, you're there now in your classroom, and it's still summer break, but you've
Quite a
been
mess in
here.
here.
Well, it looks nice from the angle that we see it, but you've been here in the classroom. Obviously, we both have been in there doing some work in the classroom,
You
but
helped me a
it's
lot.
nice. Yeah, yeah, totally. But your dedication to making sure the room, like preparing it not just physically but also energetically for the next school year, is like it's beautiful to see the dedication. It's not just a job for you. This is a way of life, and you're pouring your whole life into this. And I know a lot of people know that, there's certain professions, and teaching is one of them, that there are a lot of teachers. Well, some teachers it's a job, but some teachers it's a calling. And for you, for sure, this is a calling, and that makes a huge difference. But you've been doing this for a few years now, 2, 3 years. I can't remember. What is it? What's it been?
Two
Not
and
that
a
long.
half.
2.5 years. Okay. I think a lot of people people who work with you have made this comment, and it seems this way to me. But because you're in your niche, because you're doing what it is you're here to do, a lot of people have made the comment that you're almost like seasoned. People come to you for advice. Folks who have been working in the system for years kind of look to you in some ways as an expert in your field, and that comes across. And again, that's not. I don't. There's no ego in that. It's just clear that because you put your everything into this job, you've mastered. There's a level of mastery, I think, that you have gained and operate in. And we were just talking, and there's really 7 things that you've gleaned. There's 7 things that you have identified that you're walking away with after the last couple of years working in education. There's 7 things. And these 7 things, and if you're listening to this podcast, these 7 things will apply directly to every relationship you have. It'll apply to your life. It'll also apply to your relationship with yourself. But what I'd like to do, Taylor, in the next few minutes, is talk through these 7 things a bit. And then we want to get into something really exciting. So if you're listening to this, Taylor's going to drop a bomb on us, and it's very exciting at the end. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about these 7 things. Okay. So first thing here is number 1. This is a truth you have learned. First truth that you've learned as an educator is that brains in pain cannot learn. Can you unpack that for us a little bit? Tell us a little bit about that. Brains in pain cannot learn. What do you mean by that?
Well, so a lot of this these points that I have kind of pinpointed. I had the benefit of going to a wellness conference the other week as part of my job. And, they kind of really put into words things that I have been learning and coming to understand. And they just put it so eloquently. And so that was one of the things that we talked about at this conference. And I instantly thought of a student because we have a lot of students here with a lot of trauma. So this is a Title I school. It's a very low socioeconomic area. A lot of my students are being raised by single parents or in foster care or being raised by grandparents. Um, it's pretty common to have multiple kids in your class with multiple traumatic events. And so the idea of fight, flight, or freeze, these kids are coming in and they're instantly still in those places. And
Yep.
so when you are operating in you know a a survival mindset, your brain is not going to take in information that isn't pertinent to you being safe or to you feeling secure. And so, for example, like I worked with a student previously who tended to run out of the classroom, and he wasn't my student at the time. And so we call that eloping. It's a pretty dangerous behavior because they could run off campus, they can run somewhere where you don't see them, and so that's something that we really want to deal with. And so I was pulled in to provide support and to kind of try to figure out how to come up with a plan to help extinguish this behavior. And I observed him one day, and they were walking to lunch, and he forgot his Coca-Cola. And why a second grade student had a Coca-Cola for lunch, that's a whole other thing, but he forgot it. And so they're walking out of the classroom, and he realizes he forgot it. So he takes off. And so I follow him. I'm one of 3 people on campus that is trained and certified to handle kids in crisis, and in case we need to, if he was trying to escape campus, actually use physical maneuvers to bring them back. So I, followed after him at a safe distance. And when I caught up to him, I said, "Hey, bud, what's going on?" And he's like, "Well, I forgot my soda in the classroom." And I said, "Well, why'd you run off?" And he's like, "Well, I was upset." I said, "Could you have done something differently?" He's like, "Well, I guess I could have asked to go get it." And I was like, "Yeah, that's a great idea." And in that moment, I realized that this kid, knowing his background, is in such a state of, well, he's in fight or flight at all times. And so in that instance, when he's met with something that's frustrating or upsetting, he went straight into flight. And so, to help that kiddo, we need to move out of that survival space,
For
or
sure.
else, he's not going to be able to learn not only academics, but the skills he needs to be a successful student, a successful adult, all of those things.
100%. 100%. What's amazing, what I love about this story is that when you were able to catch up with him and actually communicate with him, he had a lot of wisdom, right? You asked him, "Is there anything that you could have done differently?" And he knew the answer, which was, "Hey, I could have asked somebody to go back and get it," and that kind of thing, which is the correct answer, right? It's there's some wisdom in that, even from a little guy, right? He had that wisdom. And the reason I think that's significant is because in my work as a coach, we're working with people all the time. I always tell people, I always say, you actually already know the right answer to just about everything that you're facing in your life. You know how to respond. When people say, "I don't know what to do," and they say, "I don't know, I feel stuck, I don't know what to do, I don't know," it's because you're in fight or flight. And when you're in a fight or flight or exacerbated nervous system, you lose access to your inner knowing, your inner wisdom. And even children have that inner knowing and inner wisdom to tap into. But to your point, if you're in fight or flight, if you're in pain, if you come out of some trauma, if you're living in trauma, you can't access it. So it's not even a discipline issue. It's
Yes. And
it's a pain issue.
yeah, and people will get frustrated, instantly frustrated, and it's understandable. Like you're trying to teach, sometimes they'll run out of the classroom in the middle of a lesson and it puts your whole class to a stop. But the thing is children will do it if they can.
Mm,
And obviously there's kids because of
sure.
trauma, even though they have the understanding, because these kids are bright. Even though they
Oh
have
yeah.
the understanding and the knowing, he can't.
Yeah.
So there's no
Not
reason to get frustrated.
yeah. Yeah. So
He
first
can't do it.
you have to address the nervous system issue, the pain issue. And I always say that if you're in survival mode and you can't figure out how to survive, most people, and our brains are wired to focus on the problem even more. But as long as you focus on the problem, you'll never get the solution. So first step is you have to focus on, I know it sounds cliche, but calming down, turning off the fight or flight is always step one, because you'll never discover the solution, which is right in front of you if you're in that state. So I love that. That's such a picture too of life itself. So brains in pain cannot learn. So number two, let's go to number two. The second truth that you've picked up so far in this profession is connection before content. Unpack that for us.
Um, so when you're working with kids, I think all kids, but especially, and people, honestly, just in general,
Sure.
but especially students who have, trauma, troubled pasts, if you're not making that connection with them, um, before you try to teach them something, there's really no they want to know you care about them first. If they need to feel connected and safe before, and it kind of touches back to that brains in pain can't learn, but that
Sure.
idea of connection, that if they, like my students, we spend the whole first week just kind of, even though I have them, most of them every year, getting reacquainted with each other and just talking a lot and having fun, because I want them to know that I care about them first. And if they know that, then when they're in my classroom and I'm asking them to do something or we're doing a lesson, even though they haven't worked through a lot of that trauma, because we have
Sure.
that connection, they know that like what I am trying to teach them, I'm teaching them for a reason and I care about them. And a lot of my kids too, when they get in trouble, which happens quite frequently, a lot of the times the conversations we have is one time one of my kids asked me, he's like, well, are you upset with me when he got in trouble? And he got in a lot of trouble. He wound up getting suspended. And
Mhm.
I said, I'm not upset with you. And I said, I'm upset with the behavior. I said, because I know what you're capable of and I
Mm,
know what your potential is. And I know that you expect more out of yourself than what you did to get in trouble. And so that's what's upsetting to me. I'm not, and in that moment, like he was crying, not gonna lie, I cried. I get quite emotional with my kids, but it's in that moment he knew that I meant it because we had that connection. That it
mhm.
wasn't just lip service. It wasn't just, he wasn't just getting punished. It was an understanding that, hey, I care about you. And the reason this is upsetting to me is because I know what you're capable of. And I know you know that too.
Yeah. That's a life altering encounter right there. I had a few with my own teachers, and they'll stay with me till I'm, for the rest of my life until I'm dead. I will always remember those moments, those specific moments that I'm sure you have all the time with these students. But I love that. That's a beautiful picture of connection, because then it's kind of like opening a container. It's kind of like taking the lid off of something. When you connect with the student, it's like removing the lid, and now you have an opportunity to deposit something of value for that student. Really beautiful. But I think that's true in human relationships in general, right? If you don't know a person or connect with them, then it's like, what do you, I've just, we've talked about this a lot, but I kind of grew up in a family where I was talked at a lot, um, but no curiosity in some ways, which I know we're going to talk a little bit about curiosity in a few minutes. But there was very little curiosity about me, but I was given a lot of advice at home about things I should do better or differently, but not a lot of connection. And so therefore, even though the advice many times was legitimate and very, very needed, I couldn't receive it because no connection. I've just learned that, especially when I meet new people or if I'm around newer folks I don't know very well, I rarely talk a lot. I rarely even talk to them as much as I ask them questions, because my heart, my desire is to connect with them first, because if I have anything of value to add, it'll be wasted without that connection. So it's beautiful. I love that you're applying this to children. Okay. This one's really interesting to me. This third truth that you've picked up on in your profession as an educator is behavior is communication. Behavior is communication. What do you mean by that?
So in education, especially with kids with behaviors, we have a lot of assessments and a lot of tools to understand the student
Mm-hmm.
and the behavior that they're exhibiting. And one of those tools is called a functional behavior assessment. And so that's when we go in and we observe the student and we observe the behavior and we interview people and we, really look at the whole picture of the behavior. So we want to know the antecedent, so what happened before the behavior, what the behavior is, and then what are they getting out of the behavior? Because it's kids don't however random things may look, there's always a reason.
Interesting.
And so, like for example, a kid blurting out in class. It may seem random, but if it's a continuous behavior, a lot of times, if you look at it, they get attention from it.
Sure.
But what is that attention that they want, that they're seeking? Is it just attention for the sake of attention? And what I've learned is that a lot of these behaviors, whether it's to gain attention or to take attention away from them, to distract, or to get out of something, so to avoid a task, what I've come to realize is that all of these really come down to students desiring a connection. Because in the
Right.
end, all of those behaviors, even though the outcome may look like I avoided the task, somehow they all end up with them sitting with an adult or someone else and to have a conversation about the behavior or to talk about what the student can do next time or tools and strategies of how maybe if they're frustrated, raise your hand instead and ask for help. But all of those are opportunities for connection.
Hmm.
And that's what I've discovered.
Totally. Can you talk a little bit about maybe a behavior that on one end looked a certain way and it caused an initial reaction in you, but then once you sat with it and you realized actually they're trying to communicate something they don't know how to communicate? Can you remember or
Yeah.
tell us about an example of that?
Yeah. So a student instantly comes to mind. He was a fourth grader last year. Unfortunately, he moved, so he's no longer
Mm-hmm.
my student.
Mm-hmm.
But he really struggles with his attention and his ability just to sit and complete tasks. He
Task, yeah.
is extremely bright. We assess the kids, we do
Mm-hmm.
cognitive assessments, and he is one of my highest scoring students. So pretty much all of his deficits in learning come from not knowing it, not him not having the cognitive processes to understand it, but that his behavior gets in the way of him completing tasks. So everything he has in his brain, you would never know it because he can't sit down and do it.
Right.
And so there was a day that he was really just out of control. So my students are with me for a small portion of the day and then they go back to their regular general education teacher. And his general education teacher called and said, I need your help. Can I send this student to your classroom? He is so overstimulated. He's blurting out. He's distracting everyone. At one point, he was outside earlier that day. Nobody could find him. He was, perched on top of the bathroom railing, squawking like a pterodactyl for no reason. There was nobody out there. There was no audience. I laugh a lot in my job, probably when I shouldn't, but so a lot of attention seeking behavior. And so I went out and got him and he came back to my class with me. And it was just he and I, and we were sitting at the table, and we were having a conversation, and be like, "Hey, bud, it looks like you're having a really hard time focusing today." And he's like, "Yeah, I am." And I said, is it something I can help you with? Do you just need a break? You want to just relax in here for a little bit? Go back to class? Would you like to bring your work here? And he was like, "Well, I kind of just really want to talk." And I was like, "Okay, we could talk." And this student is being raised by his grandparents. He was removed from his mother's care. She technically is homeless, and he visits her on the weekend at a motel. And sometimes his half brother is there too. And so he told me that he hadn't seen his brother in a long time because he had moved out of state. And that he was just having a really hard time. Sorry, I'm going to get emotional.
That's
a really
okay.
hard time because he missed his brother. And so we sat, and my brother had just moved to Texas a little while before that. And so he and I were able to have a really, really good conversation about, missing people, and understanding that even though they're maybe far away, we can always think about them and call them. And ultimately, when we think about them, they're here with us in our thoughts and in our hearts. And so we just had a really good, like, heart to heart conversation. And he and I had many conversations like that. This student is extremely intelligent. I miss him very much, which is probably why I'm crying. But it was one of those times where, he didn't need anything other than sitting and having connection, true, meaningful connection with someone that he could talk to. And he knew he could do that with me because we had set that foundation a long time before that. He and I had already had that connection, so he felt safe. And so I don't know, it's so beautiful when you work with students because their ability to connect on a deep level, they don't even know they're doing it and they just do it naturally. I feel like with adults, it's really easy for us to shut ourselves off, because we mask and we have all of these strategies so people can't know our deepest feelings. We do it all the time, but a lot of these kids don't have those walls put up yet. And if we just, make those connections and provide that safe space for them, they're gonna, know where they can go to, and they're gonna know who they can communicate to. And so when I talk about, behavior as communication, what looked like a little boy with ADHD squawking like a pterodactyl outside on the playground really was a little boy who was looking for deep connection.
Yeah.
With an adult that he felt safe with.
Yeah, that's a powerful point you're making, and I thank you for sharing, and I love your emotion, your connectivity to these kids, and the fact that you feel deeply for them because that translates to them, But the fact is, like, a lot of people, if you just look at the surface of life, you won't see what's underneath, There's a lot going on underneath the surface. It's kind of like the ocean, like, right. There's waves, there's stuff going on at the surface. And if you just deal with that, you will never get to the depths. You'll never get to the life, actually. Right. Because if you go under the water a little bit, there's a whole ecosystem. There's life under there, but we don't touch that unless we go a little deeper. So here's this kid squawking like a pterodactyl, acting, like some people would say he's acting very foolish, and they may just be tempted to address the behavior. But like you said, behavior is communication. He's in the strategy of that child, right? Of that elementary age child this is his way of saying, I don't know how to ask for connection, but this is how I'm asking. And you were able to see that. So beautiful. And it's not just, by the way, not just children that do irrational things to get attention. And again, this is not conscious. This is egoic, right? It's a part of our psychological structure that we all have. And sometimes we're not conscious of what we need, but the ego or the psychological structure is trying to actually get our attention. And so if we have a pattern or reoccurring pattern that may be unhelpful in some way, it's like, it's good to get to begin to like, what is this? What am I trying to communicate? What's this part of me trying to communicate? So good. But I'm glad that right, children don't know what they don't know. So this is why we need folks like you to help communicate and understand that behavior is not personal. It's actually a form of communication. All behavior. So important. So important. Today's episode is sponsored by Free to Love Corporate Solutions. Did you know that any company or organization is only as competent, capable, and responsive as its workforce? And did you also know that, nationally speaking, it's been estimated that stress costs companies up to $150 billion, B with a billion, $150 billion in lost productivity every single year? What if your company and your place of work could actually be a source of healing and transformation for its workforce? Well, believe it or not, there is a growing community of conscious companies and businesses that see it as their mission to be a place of healing and transformation, not just for the products that they're offering to the wider world, but also they really desire that their place of employment would be a culture of healing and transformation for the workforce itself. And I've had the opportunity to work with a number of small businesses that are just doing fantastic work in the world. And I would like you to hear from the founder and CEO of a company that is striving to make a difference, not only in the world, but also in the people that work for the company.
I own a real estate brokerage, BRA Realty, here in Pennsylvania, and we have about 110 realtors. Jamal came out a few weeks back and did a training in replace of one of our regular trainings, and the feedback was phenomenal. Really stuck with me was he created a space of safety for a conversation of transformation to take place, where not just did agents walk away with great tips and insight about what's driving them, but also the ability for them to actually take the time and work on themselves in that session, specifically around getting clear on what matters most to them, and to the point where we had multiple agents that were actually crying. I had multiple agents come up to me afterwards just saying it was one of the best trainings we've ever done, and that we should have Jamal back once a month. So just to give you a quick shout out, Jamal, you did an amazing job. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for your ongoing coaching with myself. I've been working with you now for over 3 months and have had really, really great results. I intend to stick with it, as there's always room for growth, and having someone like you in my corner has been really helpful. So I appreciate everything you do, and thanks for being you.
So if you're a small business owner, maybe you're on the executive team, you're a founder, a CEO, or even if you're just in management of some level at a company or in a corporate culture where you oversee people at any capacity, and if you're interested in having a conversation where we may be able to explore how our program can assist you, can assist your company, and assist your workforce, I'd love to have a conversation with you about that possibility. All you have to do is go to my website, jamaljivanjee.com/corporate solutions. Again, that's jamaljivanjee.com/corporate solutions. You'll be able to fill out a form there, and we will get back with you and set up a time to have a conversation with you about how we can assist you in transforming your company. Okay, so for the fourth truth that you have discovered, and this is a powerful one, is that your belief about a student or a person, but in your case, a student with your profession, belief about a student is the greatest impact you can make on them. What do you mean by that?
So if I'm remembering correctly, you actually posted about this. It's called the Pygmalion effect. Is
The
that what it's
Pygmalion
called?
effect. That's correct. Yep.
Yes. And so we actually discussed this at the conference that I was at. And so, if we can change our beliefs about our students or those people in our lives without even communicating that to them, their behavior will change. They will meet your expectation of them. And the opposite is true. If you have a low expectation of someone, they're going to meet that expectation every opportunity they have. And the way we communicate that to them is that, unintentionally and unconsciously, we treat people different based on how we feel
100%.
about them. And so, one of the biggest challenges for my students in particular is a lot of them struggle with behaviors. They are the wiggliest group of kids on campus. I think that's why I'm perfect for my job, is because to me, it's just honestly, if I'm being honest, to me, it's funny half the time because they're just so cute. And I understand that, it's the behavior is communicating something completely different than what we think it is. And, it'd shock you how many times adults take children's behavior personally. But I can see how a student acts in my classroom when I have a higher expectation of them, because I can see them on a different level. And I do have that opportunity more because I don't want to say other teachers just don't give them the time of day. I work with kids in small groups, so I get to know these kids on a deeper level than most teachers do. And I also deal with them when they're, having a hard time. And so kids tend to open up to me more. And so, I can see the difference in behavior when they're around me and I expect things out of them, then sometimes when they're in another setting, where someone doesn't think they're capable of doing anything except for distracting the classroom and, not doing their classwork. But, they will rise to our expectation of them.
That's right.
And, in special education, we set goals. So all of my students are on IEPs, individualized education plans. And so I think that's one of the benefits of my job, is that I am constantly assessing and aware of where students are academically, social, emotionally, behaviorally. And we sit down as a team and we say, what can they achieve in a year? So in the back of my mind and the team's mind is we know we have a goal for them. And that's not always normal in education, where you can sit down and come up with a goal for every student to meet. But we have a mindset of constant potential for our students in special education. And I think that's actually a gift, because naturally we tend to have a higher expectation for them because we're looking a year out always. They may be having this behavior now, but they're not going to have it in a year out. And that's what we're expecting of them. And so in some instances, it comes a little more natural because that's just the nature of my job. And it can also be hard. It's not easy. I don't want to fault other teachers when they struggle with that, because it's hard. Being a teacher is hard. You're in a classroom with almost 30 students, dealing with lots of behaviors, lots of different personalities. So I feel fortunate in that sense that that's just kind of the nature of my job. But could you imagine how different your class would be if you had an expectation for each of your students that was, that they were amazing and they were great students and they're deep learners and deep thinkers and, they're leaders. If that's the mindset we approach all of our students with, the change you're going to see in your classroom over a year is going to be astronomical.
100%. And you know this, and I love that you're bringing this point up because this is something you can't fake. A lot of people, a lot of people will try to fake it. You know, and I've had other places I've talked about this, but you know, I grew up. One of the things is, you know, I grew up in a family where how another person sees you is energy. There is a frequency. It's like all human beings are, and there's some science to this. It may sound woo woo to some folks. All human beings are emanating what is equivalent to a Wi-Fi signal. There's an energetic frequency that gets emitted from the human body. It extends about 6 to 8 inches outside the body. Some, you know, depending on your vitality, and the more vital you are energetically, the more it does extend out. But this signal you're putting out communicates so many things. It communicates your presence. It communicates the state of being that you're in. But it's also, people pick up on it. And when you have a certain view of a person, you don't even have to say anything. If you hold somebody in high regard and you walk into the room with them, they pick up on that. They can tell, especially children. Children can pick up, does this person like me, deeply see value in me, or is this person tolerating me? Is this person trying to get me out of the hair? Do they see me as an irritant? You know, and I can tell you that whatever your view of that person is, no matter what you say and no matter what you do, your energy is going to be the loudest thing to them, whether they can consciously be aware of that and put it that way or not. And I could tell you so many stories of people in my own family, my own dad saying the right things to me and it never landed, or saying the wrong things and it landed because it matched the energy of how he saw me. Then I remember specific teachers who carried an energy. They saw me, one of the few people to actually see me. And so what they said to me and how they interacted with me was very effective simply because they were able to see me. And it changed my whole life. So I love that you're actually picking up on this, and, you know, especially for teachers, educators. I think sometimes teachers, you know, because again, educators are overworked, usually underpaid, very stressed, but it's just beautiful to come back and to see, like, actually the most effective thing you do, beyond the content, beyond the arithmetic and the science and the, you know, all the other subjects you teach, is just how you walk in the room and look at them. What do you see when you see them, right? And this is why I'm biased here, but I think if you're an educator, if you're in education, you're going to project onto your students what you see in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you have deep love and respect for yourself, this is not assumed. Most people do not. As a life coach, I can tell you, most people have deep shame and deep loathing when it comes to themselves. So if you're an educator and you haven't done that work, it's going to be really challenging for you to see your children in a way that's different than the way you see yourself. So getting a little plug there, but don't neglect the work, the inner work. But I love your point there. How you see a student is going to be your lasting and greatest impact on them. Okay, so we're up to the fifth truth here, the truth that you've discovered. And I kind of like to combine a couple of these because I think they're very much connected. But the fifth and the sixth truth, all right? So you talk, the fifth one, you talk about the more we connect, the less we correct, which I think is a powerful point. The more you connect, the less you'll correct. And then the sixth one is get curious, not furious. I feel like these two go hand in hand. Can you talk about those a little bit? Get curious, not furious. And the more you connect, the less you're going to need to correct. What do you mean by that?
So what I've observed is that the more connection you have with a group of students, the more motivated they are in class. You know, the less you're going to have to correct behavior. You know, the more connection you have tends to provide more opportunities for students to feel safe and communicate, which is typically what they're doing with their behavior, right? So you end up having to correct less because you're making that meaningful connection ahead of time. And then the other one is get curious, not furious, which kind of goes along with making connection, because a lot of times when something happens, especially as a teacher, it's very easy to get very upset instead of,
Sure.
asking why. And part of that is that connection, always going back to connection. And like one of the examples, the get curious, not furious, that's another phrase that I learned at this wellness conference. And it kind of put into words things that I had been observing. And so an example that they had talked about was, like you're sitting in traffic and this guy cuts you off and you're pissed off. You're like, what the heck? We're all sitting here in traffic and you get mad, and does that do you any good? No, because you are still sitting in traffic. But
By the way, does that ever happen to you? Do you ever get upset with other people's driving?
one person in
Just curious.
particular, I'm sure
I wonder who
everybody
that could
can
be.
guess who it is. I blame you're not learning how to drive in California for that.
I see.
No, you're an okay driver. I feel safe. I just have preferences.
I understand. Anyway, I sidetracked you. Please
okay.
continue.
But so you're still sitting in traffic. So the only person in that instance that it is hurting is you. You just let somebody else change how you feel. That's you losing your own power. And
Sure.
so in that instance, a great practice would be to get curious, right? Oh, well, that person that just cut me off, maybe even flipped me off, they had a dog in their car. That dog probably ate something it wasn't supposed to, and they're trying to get to the vet to save the dog's life. Great. Please flip me off again and cut me off. I don't care. Save your dog, right? And so when students have behaviors in class, or like one time I've broken up 2 fights at my elementary school. One, it was sisters, and so I have a sister, so I knew, sisterly frustrations, I get that. But there was another instance where I broke up a fight, and in that instant, a lot of people would get very upset with these kids. They were older, they were 5th graders. But in my head, I'm like, well, why are we so upset, girls? Like, what's going on? It's not going to that instantly mad place, because especially when you're dealing with kids, if you go into a place that you're furious,
yeah,
they're not going to open up to you, which means you're not going to make that meaningful connection. So the likelihood of that behavior occurring again is just,
yeah,
again, back
totally.
to the connect more, and then you need less correction.
Yeah. How much stress we could eliminate from our lives, especially I think for educators, anytime that you are, or even if you're in management, if you're in leadership at any level and you have to work with people or deal with other people, the most stressful part of working with other people is because so many things feel personal. People take things personally. They feel like it's personal against them. And I've just learned over time, and actually there's a great book out there called the 4 or 5 agreements, right? It's written by the same author, the fifth agreement, or the 4 agreements. One of those agreements is this: if you make this agreement with life, this is a massive, massive hack to success, which is nothing is personal, no matter how it feels. If you can understand nothing is personal, then you can get curious. You can afford at that point to get curious because it's not personal. I mean, I learned this as a corrections officer working in a prison, and these, you're dealing with all kinds of guys, and you represent somebody with a uniform on you. When you walk in with that uniform, they see you in a certain light, but they don't know me.
Yeah.
So it's not personal.
Yeah.
And it allows you to get curious.
Yeah.
And to dig in. And go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You can finish. I'll go after you.
Well, I was going to say this. I look at the word curiosity and connection as being synonyms of each other. They, to me, are the same word. Your ability to be curious about another person, your ability to be curious is going to be to the degree that you have curiosity about another person is going to be the degree that you can connect with them. And if you meet people who are profoundly uncurious, you're going to see somebody that has very little connections with other people. So the more curious you can become, the more connected you will be, and you will experience that connection. And that's key for a profession like yours,
Mm.
obviously.
Yeah. I wanted to make note, and I just thought of it while you were talking. Um, that's one of the greatest lessons I've learned since, you know, getting into a relationship with you and now being married to you. You know, I get 24/7 life coaching, whether I ask for it or not is my joke. But it really, it really does benefit me, because that's one of the biggest things is it's really easy in education to take things personally. And that's been one of my biggest lessons is nothing is personal. And especially when you're working with kids, like it is really easy to take things personally.
Sure.
But another thing that you always talk about is, you know, when things upset me or make me furious, being able to reflect and be like, well, it's not actually what that person is doing. The reason it's agitating something inside of me is because that was already inside of me. Like it
Yeah.
wouldn't be bothering me if that was already there, if that wasn't already there. And
100%.
so in the moment, can't always do that, right? Because I got a classroom full of kids, but you know, allowing and kids, it's hard for me to get frustrated because I think they're funny half the time. But you know, when something does, especially with it's more with coworkers, when something is creating that, I don't want to say furious because I don't really get that furious, but like that
Feels
agitation
personal.
agitation inside of me. It's because that vibration, something inside of me is vibrating and it's agitating something, and it's because that's actually mirroring to me something that was already inside of me. And what is that gonna like, what is that doing for me? Like how do I work through this? Like where did that come from in me? Right.
Right.
And
Right.
then, you know, realizing, oh, it's not personal. It really has nothing to do with me. But the reason it's agitating me is because I already had that feeling somewhere here, and it's just mirroring it to me.
100%. Yeah. So good. Really good. And so the last truth we want to talk about today before we get into your really fun, exciting project that you want to share and talk about is this is the last truth, and probably a very, very powerful one. And I talk about this a lot in my coaching work as well. And it is be a thermostat, not a thermometer. I love that. Be a thermostat, not a thermometer. Why do you say that?
So this has to do kind of with, I see it more dealing with culture, which is huge at a school and in your classroom. Like you as the teacher, you're the leader, you create the culture in your classroom. You know, does that culture include respect? Does it include dignity? All of those things, that's something that you are constantly creating. If you're a thermometer, you're going to allow the people that come into your environment to change the temperature or change the culture, and then you're just going to move with it. Whereas if you're a thermostat, you're creating the environment. You are creating the space in which they're coming in, and then when things get too hot, you bring it back down. When things get too cool, you bring it back up. And so, you know, I see this with like adults I work with being, you know, a thermostat, like instead of a thermometer, like it's hard to put into words because it's just something like I tend to naturally do with adults. But to, you know, use an example, you know, in my classroom, you know, I put a lot of intention into my space, into the
Yep.
energy of my space, and
Yep.
that's all part of creating a culture. And because my room is here for ultimately wellness is what I want my room to be for. I want it to be a safe place for all students to come and get exactly what they need, exactly when they need it. And the only way I can do that is by being a thermostat. Because if I can't regulate myself and then regulate the environment, they don't feel
Sure.
safe. You know, they don't feel
100%.
secure. And so my room doesn't look like it right now because it looks like Tornado Taylor has touched down in the middle of it. But you know, I put a lot of intention into it, and that's part of how I am a thermostat for my kids, as well as, you know, regulating my own self. And, you know, because it can get crazy. We like to have fun. You know, there's times where like we need that. And I'm gonna bring that temperature up, you know, because that's what they need in that moment. But there's also times where they're up and they don't need that. They need, to be calm.
Yep.
And I've actually, I had a student in crisis, and I deal with this a lot when I'm dealing one-on-one with students who are in crisis. And so I had a student who was in crisis, and he was in crisis because he got in trouble, and he was in the front office, and he could not calm down. He was hysterical. He couldn't catch his breath. He was honestly terrified. And this student has so much trauma in his past. I can't even talk about it, but,
Sure.
For confidentiality reasons, but
Sure.
how this kid operates day to day and gets anything done, I don't know how he does it.
I know.
And when I walked into that room, the temperature was like boiling, right?
Yep.
He couldn't do anything. He just
Yep.
was hysterical. And so in that moment, if I had entered that room and if I was a thermostat, that wasn't going to help him. And
If
so,
you were a thermometer.
or sorry, a thermometer. And so when I went in there, I sat down and, I had him breathe with me, I was like, you have to look at me, look at me in the eyes. I said, I want you to breathe with me. We're going to breathe in through our nose, out through our mouth. And I said, we're going to take deep, calming breaths. And we did that, and I was I was reassuring him, like it's all going to be okay. Even though I knew he was going to get in a lot of trouble, there was nothing I
Sure.
could do about that, but just reassuring him that in the end, everything was going to be okay. And that we just needed to calm down. By the time someone else entered the room, he was asleep.
So beautiful.
And so, it's so important with these kids, especially students with trauma, especially children in general that can't
100%.
regulate themselves. They need someone to regulate them.
Yeah. Well,
So-
children, they just don't have those tools, and that's
No.
okay because they're children. But adults we as adults need to learn those tools of how to, turn down the temperature when it's needed, turn up the temperature when it's needed, and that just assumes that you have to be in control of yourself, right? But believe it or not, and I talk about this all the time with folks. A lot of people will say, I hope it's a good day today, or I hope it's I hope it's not a bad day today, and I understand that, but that's being a thermometer. I hope it's because you have no control over if it's a good day or bad day. But if you have control over yourself, if you have control over your thought process, your inner state of being, then it really doesn't matter if it's a good day or bad day, because first of all, it's just a day. How the day will be up to you to determine based upon how you respond to certain events. But you have to be in control. You have to have learned how to shift from being a thermometer to a thermostat in order to do that. So you set the temperature. And children absolutely need that. So I applaud you for bringing this out, and for learning about this, for talking about this, for coming on here on this show, to just, because obviously you're talking about education, you're talking about students, but you're really just talking about life and people, and you're getting ready to start, and we can wrap up with this, but I'm super excited for you. You're getting ready to start another brand new school year. And by the time this podcast releases, you probably will have just started it, or be in the throes of preparing for the first day of school. And you have a plan, a strategic plan to really connect with these students and develop them in a pretty groundbreaking way, that especially groundbreaking for maybe our area and the school that you're in. I want to hear a little bit about what your plan is. What are you, and it's already been approved, right? You've already talked to the right power broker, so you're going to be able to do this. Talk about the plan. What are you going to do this school year?
So I have a few loves in life. I love my students. I love my job. Of course, I love you, my husband. But coffee is pretty high up
coffee.
on that list.
Love coffee.
And my students know that. I'm kind of known for it on campus. I drink multiple cups of coffee a day to the point where one day I was running around all day. I'd only had 1 cup of coffee, and my kids gave me a hard time because they're like, "What is that? Your 5th cup of coffee?" And I was like, "No, guys, it's my first. I just keep microwaving it." And they're like, "Yeah, right, Miss Taylor." So I am also in charge this next year of some of our intervention programs. And so, because I have the training, I am really going to try to focus a lot on our behavior interventions and our attendance interventions. And I was trying to think of a way to combine all of that, my loves, the kids, interventions. What's something fun that we could do? And I follow a resource specialist, which is the title of my position. And you're going to hate this, my love, but she's from Michigan. But this can be the one good thing that came out of Michigan. Just the only one.
Only one.
The only one. She started a coffee cart program at her school. And
Okay.
so I read through her curriculum and I was like, this is exactly what I was looking for. And
A
so
coffee cart program.
a
By the way, before you get into this, you talk about interventions and attendance intervention, right? Because and just for the listeners, because they may not be aware of those terms,
yes,
intervention basically, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but what you're saying is sometimes students don't come to school
yes,
because the parents don't get them there.
yep,
Sometimes there's a crisis at some level. So you
yes,
come up with interventions like, how can we motivate? Because here's the thing. If a student is not motivated and they're not, and there's no structure at home where they have to come to school, students will just not come to school. And this is
yeah,
detrimental to for their whole life,
yeah,
actually. So you're tasked with coming up with plans of how do we get these students motivated and get them to, because they're in many ways, unfortunately, even at the elementary age, if they don't want to go to school, they won't go. And nobody will make them come. So
Yep.
how do we motivate these students? A lot of folks don't realize that. That's what you're dealing with.
yeah,
So intervention. So this coffee cart program is to be an intervention in so many different areas,
yes.
right?
But
Okay.
so it's for lots of different areas, but where I think it stems from is a desire for connection. So I want to provide these students with an opportunity to feel connected and invested in something at school that is not only going to motivate them to be here, but also provide lots of opportunities to work on social skills, academic skills, communication skills, and they're not even going to know it because they're going to be having fun making coffee. And so
you're talking about a coffee shop. A coffee cart is
yes,
like a mobile coffee business.
yes. So once I have everything that I need for the program, the idea would be that teachers will send me their orders and then the students will put those orders together. So say so-and-so second grade teacher wants a black coffee with 2 packets of stevia. I will help brew the coffee because it is hot. I will pour it, but then the students will put the stevia in. If a teacher wants a couple pumps of creamer, they'll put the creamer in, and then they will deliver the coffee and collect the money.
Amazing.
And so
they
I know
you're teaching entrepreneurship at such a young age, which is fantastic.
yes, and you know, one of the hardest things to do as an adult who works with children is to let go. Because I think there's just an intrinsic fear that's just there that if we don't, as the adult, don't step in and help control the thing or lead it, that it's not going to happen correctly or the way it's supposed to. And that's something I've always struggled with. I tend to, insert myself into things and take things. Oh, why are you making that face?
I'm not. I'm just listening. I'm just listening.
Okay. Take things over because there's a certain way I want it done. And so, I feel like this is going to help me grow as well in that area because the idea is to really let these kids take ownership of it and to build a sense of community together around entrepreneurship or, around, creating opportunities for problem solving skills, executive functioning skills, all of these things, and providing them with an opportunity to make connections with each other. And I think it's really easy, especially I have a very easy time making connections with my students, with me and them, but to provide them an opportunity to make connections with each other. Because ultimately, I feel just from observations that if they can make meaningful connections with each other, that is sometimes even more motivating and
Oh, sure.
beneficial to them than making a connection
Well,
with an adult.
it's absolutely, it's kind of like why, when kids are on a team, a sports team, a drama team, something, that there's a sense of mission, there's a sense of community that comes with that connection. And these are lifelong skills that get developed. But, if you come from a lower socioeconomic bracket, there's not as many opportunities to get involved in those kind of things, and especially at the elementary school age. This is I love the idea, because there'll be a team. They'll be running this business out of the school, serving the other teachers, learning how to do it. I mean, so many good things are going to come from this. It's a brilliant idea, and we'll also forgive the fact that the lady who gave you this idea comes from Michigan. So we won't have to think about that too much. For the listeners, I'm from Ohio, so we have a little
Buckeyes.
rivalry going. Yes, go Buckeyes. We have a little rivalry with that state up north. But aside from all of that, Taylor, I'm really excited for this project, for this new school year. Tell us what you need. I know, and people, if you've ever been around a teacher, you know that teachers, I mean, I'm amazed at the time and money, your own time, your own money that you put into your classroom. This is true of teachers. It's a love affair. I mean, you spend so much money of your own money on your work, which is beautiful. But this is an expensive, to start this coffee cart, which is it's a little business that you're starting with your students. It's not cheap.
No.
Tell us a little bit about what you need. What's going to help you get this business up and running for your classroom this year?
So I have created an Amazon wish list that includes everything needed to start the coffee cart program, bare minimums. So a coffee maker, a cart for the kids to push it on, cups, coffee, sugar, creamer, just the bare bones of the program. And if I could, I would just buy it all myself and get it up and going. But unfortunately, coffee machines are not cheap. And so
this is also an opportunity to get other people involved in the project too, which is fun.
And so I know that I am heavily invested in my students. But even if they're not aware of it, the energy of people being invested in them as well is going to be huge. And so, I've linked the Amazon wish list in my Instagram profile.
And we'll put that link in the show notes. So if you're listening to this,
I'll give it to you as well.
If you're listening to this, whatever platform, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, whatever, just go to the show notes wherever you're listening to this, and that link to your Amazon list, right, for the coffee cart will be there.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you're listening to this episode, if anything that Taylor has shared here in this episode has, blessed you in any way or encouraged you, and you'd like to give back to this podcast and even to Taylor specifically for this school year, and really follow along with what she's doing, and just help her make an impact with these children, let me encourage you to go to this link. Do go to the show notes. Go to the Amazon link, and everything helps. Anything you could do will be a great help, and it will really connect you to this project, and we'll keep you updated as to how it goes. And we'll have Taylor back on, and she'll tell us all about what transpired from this.
Yeah, there's not a better group of kids, I feel, to invest in than these kiddos. They're amazing. And to be able to provide them with this opportunity, I I feel grateful that I'm in a position to support my students in this way. And, you know, I would just appreciate any support you want to provide for them as well. Cause you know, this is going to make a huge difference in their lives. I feel like.
Oh, 100%. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. I just, thank you for the time and energy you put into this. I firmly believe this, but, we all, in order for all of us to have gotten where we are today, we needed help. None of us get where we are supposed to go without help, and other people are that help. And I can't imagine where I would be in life today without just very key teachers at very key, places in time, intersecting with my path, that have made all the difference in my life. And, kids, there's a lot of trauma. Our society is facing lots of problems. We have a whole new generation of folks. I know I sound like an older person here a little when I say that, but we have a whole new generation of folks that have tremendous trauma, drug abuse, folks that are really just they haven't grown up themselves, and they're raising children. And these children don't have the basics economically, emotionally. Family dynamics have changed so radically in the last generation that there's just so much trauma that they're dealing with. And so people like you, Taylor, are like the grace of God for children. They literally are. Without folks like yourself, kids, where would the next generation be? This is the future of our country. This is the future of our world that you are working with. And it's so vital that there are people like you doing the work that you're doing now more than ever. So thank you, Taylor, for being here. Thank you for your work. And I can't wait to see. And guys, please do go to the link in the show notes. Please do click on that. Get Taylor, help her with her coffee cart and getting this business up and running. It's a small, practical way you can give back and be connected to what's happening here. Thank you so much for listening all the way through to the end of this podcast episode. When you show up and you receive the gift that was for you in this episode, it not only benefits you, it benefits all those that you love and the wider world around us. This work that you're doing, the hunger that you have, it's so important, and I commend you for tuning in and being open. If this podcast has been a blessing to you, then I would ask that you do something to give back to this episode, to give back to this podcast. One of the things that you can do, and it's cost-free, very easy, and is super helpful, is if you'll just go to iTunes and rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Also, if you'll go to Spotify, if you listen on Spotify, go to Spotify and rate and review this podcast on Spotify. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. It makes a huge difference in the algorithm, and it helps people find our show. Thank you again for being here. And until next time, take care.